OMG. They finally realized why you never asked them to come back and their heart is in pieces. My beloved child, don't skip, stay till the end, because something huge is waiting. They finally realized it. The truth they kept pushing away has suddenly become impossible to ignore. You never asked them to come back. Not once. You never chased them for another chance, never tried to force your way back into their world, and never begged them to understand what they had lost. At first, they convinced themselves that your silence meant nothing. They thought you would eventually break it. They expected a message, a sign, some small proof that you were still waiting exactly where they left you. But that moment never came. And now something has shifted inside them. Don't skip, because what they are beginning to understand about your silence is far bigger than they expected. You weren't silent because you had nothing to say. You became silent because you had finally seen enough. And the person who once believed they had unlimited time with you is now realizing that some doors don't slam when they close. Sometimes they close quietly, and that silence becomes the loudest answer of all. What happened next was the part they never prepared themselves for. They started replaying everything. The conversations they dismissed. The moments when you gave more than they noticed. The times you stayed patient when walking away would have been easier. Suddenly, memories that once seemed ordinary began carrying a completely different weight. They remembered how deeply you cared without demanding recognition for it. And then came the realization that shook everything they thought they knew. You didn't ask them to come back because somewhere inside you, you understood that real love should never have to beg to be chosen. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you. They had expected your absence to make you miss them more, but they never imagined your absence would make them finally see you clearly. Now every day you remain silent becomes another reminder that you may have learned how to live without the answer you once wanted. And that realization is hitting them harder than any message ever could. But there is one final layer they still haven't fully accepted, and this is where everything changes. They are beginning to wonder whether your silence wasn't the ending at all, but the moment you finally chose yourself. Think about that. They thought you would return because they believed your heart would always pull you backward. Instead, your heart may have carried you somewhere they can no longer reach so easily. Don't skip. The biggest realization is still coming. Because now they aren't only asking, "Why didn't you ask me to come back?" They are asking something far more powerful. What did they finally understand about me that made them stop asking? And once that question entered their mind, the entire story changed. They can no longer look at your silence the same way. They can no longer pretend your absence is temporary. Something huge is waiting for you, because what they realize next may explain why their heart suddenly feels the full weight of losing someone they once believed would always be there. But now the truth is becoming impossible for them to escape. Every day you remain quiet, another piece of the story becomes clearer in their mind. They are finally seeing that you were never asking for too much, you were simply waiting for the same certainty you had already given them. And when that certainty never arrived, you stopped explaining yourself. That is the part they never expected. They thought your heart would keep reaching back no matter how much time passed. They believed the connection was strong enough to guarantee your return. But your silence has shattered that assumption. Don't skip, because something huge is waiting for you. They are beginning to understand that when someone who once cared deeply suddenly stops asking, stops chasing, and stops trying to repair everything alone, it doesn't always mean their feelings disappeared. Sometimes it means they finally understood their own value. And that realization is hitting them differently now, because they know exactly how much patience you once had for them. Then something even more surprising started happening. Small things began reminding them of you when they least expected it. A familiar moment. A certain place. A quiet evening when there was nothing distracting them from their own thoughts. And suddenly, the question returned, why did they never ask me to come back? At first they searched for an easy answer, but every easy answer fell apart. Because deep down, they remember the effort you made before you became silent. They remember the chances hidden inside ordinary conversations. They remember moments when you were hoping they would finally understand without needing another explanation. Stay till the end, because the next realization changes the meaning of everything. They are starting to see that your silence didn't appear overnight. It came after you had already said enough through your loyalty, your patience, and your presence. You didn't disappear without a reason. You simply reached the point where repeating your worth to someone who should have recognized it naturally no longer made sense. And this is where their heart truly begins to feel the weight of what happened. They are no longer wondering whether you still remember them. They are wondering whether they waited so long that you finally stopped waiting for them. Don't skip. That question is becoming heavier because they know there was once a version of you who would have welcomed clarity, honesty, and genuine effort. But they don't know whether that version of you is still standing in the same place. Something huge is waiting for you, because their deepest realization hasn't fully surfaced yet. They are beginning to understand that you never asked them to come back because the next move was never supposed to be yours. You had already shown what they meant to you. You had already carried enough of the connection. And now they are confronting the one truth they never imagined they would have to face. Perhaps you weren't waiting for them to return anymore. Perhaps you were waiting to see whether they would finally realize, completely on their own, that losing you was never what they truly wanted. And suddenly, the silence they once felt comfortable with doesn't feel comfortable anymore. Something has changed inside them, because they are finally connecting the moments they ignored with the absence they feel now. Don't skip. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you. They once assumed that if enough time passed, you would eventually become the one to reopen the door. They thought your feelings would overpower your disappointment. But now they are realizing something they never considered. Maybe you were watching their actions the entire time. Maybe every day they stayed distant gave you another answer. Maybe you never asked them to come back because you wanted to know whether they would choose you without being convinced. And now that realization is turning everything upside down. They understand that being missed is not the same as being chosen, and you were no longer willing to settle for uncertainty disguised as connection. That is why your silence feels so powerful now. It isn't demanding anything from them. It isn't trying to prove anything. Yet somehow, it is forcing them to confront everything they avoided when you were still close. But the next realization is the one they were completely unprepared for. They are beginning to remember the version of you they had access to, the one who cared without keeping score, noticed the smallest details, and stayed longer than most people would have. Back then, they may have believed those things would always be available. Now they understand how rare they actually were. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, because this is where regret starts changing into clarity. They are asking themselves questions they should have asked much earlier. Why didn't I appreciate their presence when it was right in front of me? Why did I assume there would always be another opportunity? Why did I believe they would keep reaching toward me forever? And every question leads back to the same uncomfortable answer. Because they underestimated what your silence would eventually mean. Don't skip, because they are finally realizing that you didn't stop asking because you suddenly stopped caring. You stopped asking because there comes a moment when a person must see whether love will walk toward them willingly, or whether they have been carrying the entire distance alone. Now comes the part that changes the entire story. They have started imagining something they never thought they would have to imagine. A future where you genuinely move forward without needing their return to complete it. And that possibility is making your absence feel different. Before, they believed there was still unlimited time. Now they are beginning to understand that time changes people, silence reveals priorities, and distance can teach someone what endless conversations never could. Don't skip. Something huge is waiting for you. Because their heart isn't only reacting to losing your attention. It is reacting to the possibility that they misunderstood your value until they could no longer experience it the same way. They finally see why you never asked them to come back. You had already given them something more powerful than another request. You gave them the freedom to show what they truly wanted. And their choices answered you. But here is the revelation they still haven't fully processed. Now that they finally understand your silence, they may be realizing that the person they expected to come running back was actually becoming strong enough to never chase what had already chosen to walk away. Now the realization has reached a place they can no longer silence. Don't skip. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you. They are finally understanding that your absence was never a game designed to make them chase you. You weren't trying to create confusion, prove a point, or make them wonder about you. You simply stopped carrying something that required two hearts but had begun resting almost entirely on yours. And that truth is hitting them harder than they expected. They remember how naturally you showed up, how many times you tried to understand them, and how often you gave another chance without turning it into a dramatic moment. Back then, your consistency looked ordinary because they had grown used to receiving it. Now, without it, they can finally measure its value. The shocking part is that they once believed your love meant you would always return. But they are discovering the opposite. Sometimes the person who loves deeply is also the person who eventually walks forward quietly, because they know genuine connection should never require endless convincing. Then comes the question they cannot stop asking themselves: what if I realized everything too late? Stay till the end, because this is where their entire understanding begins to shift. They are replaying the moments when one different choice could have changed everything. One honest conversation. One clear decision. One moment of choosing you without hesitation. They can see those moments differently now because distance has removed every distraction. Don't skip. Something huge is waiting for you. The person they assumed would always be emotionally available may no longer be waiting for an explanation. And that possibility is breaking apart the certainty they once had. They finally understand why you never asked them to come back, because asking would have given them another opportunity to return without truly realizing your worth. You needed their decision to come from within them. You needed to know whether they could recognize what was standing in front of them without being reminded. And now, when they finally recognize it, they are confronting the possibility that your silence has already answered the question they took far too long to understand. But what happens inside them next is the revelation they never saw coming. They begin to realize that losing your presence didn't erase what you gave them, it made every piece of it clearer. The patience. The warmth. The way you made ordinary moments feel meaningful. Suddenly, they understand that what they considered replaceable may have been one of those rare connections people recognize only after life becomes quiet enough to show them the difference. Don't skip. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you. Their heart is in pieces not simply because you didn't ask them to return, but because they finally understand why you didn't have to. You had already shown them who you were. You had already shown them what you could give. The unanswered question was never whether you cared enough to call them back. It was whether they cared enough to come back without being called. And now that truth has landed completely, another realization is beginning to rise, one so unexpected that it could change how they see every moment between you from this point forward. And now comes the realization they were hoping they would never have to face. Don't skip. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you. They are beginning to understand that your silence wasn't empty, it was an answer. Every day you didn't reach out was quietly saying what endless explanations could never say, I already showed you how deeply I cared. Now I need to see what you choose. That thought changes everything for them. Because suddenly, they remember all the moments when you could have walked away but stayed. They remember the patience they once assumed would never run out. And now they see the difference between someone abandoning a connection and someone finally refusing to carry it alone. You never asked them to come back because you wanted something real, not something created by pressure. You wanted them to recognize your place in their life without needing to lose you first. But they didn't. And now the shocking truth is becoming painfully clear. While they were waiting for you to break the silence, you were learning that you could survive it. What they discover next changes the meaning of your entire absence. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you. They begin wondering what your life looks like now. Are you still thinking about the same memories? Are you becoming happier without the uncertainty? Have you finally stopped checking the emotional door they assumed would remain open forever? Those questions stay with them because they no longer have the certainty they once took for granted. Don't skip, because this is where everything becomes deeper. They realize they weren't only losing conversations with you, they were losing access to a version of you that gave freely because you believed in what the connection could become. That version of you may have changed. Not into someone cold, but into someone clearer. Someone who understands that being deeply connected to another person should never mean abandoning your own dignity. And suddenly, the thought of you moving forward doesn't feel temporary to them anymore. It feels real. That is when their heart finally understands what their mind kept refusing to accept. You might genuinely stop waiting. But there is still one enormous truth hiding beneath everything they have realized, and this is the one that turns regret into something much deeper. Don't skip. Something huge is waiting for you. They finally understand that you never needed a perfect return, you needed a genuine choice. You needed someone who could look at what existed between you and decide, without being chased, reminded, or persuaded, that it mattered enough to protect. And now they know why you remained silent. You had already made your choice clear through everything you gave. The next choice belonged to them. Stay till the end, because the story is about to reach a completely different level. They are no longer asking why you didn't call them back. Now they are wondering why they ever needed to be called back in the first place. Why didn't they recognize what they had while they still had it? Why did your absence have to teach them what your presence had been showing them all along? And the answer forming inside them is the one they cannot easily forget. Sometimes you only understand the weight of someone's presence when their silence becomes the only thing left speaking. Then, when they thought they had already understood everything, one final realization hit them even harder. Don't skip. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you. They suddenly understood that you never asked them to come back because you were no longer searching for promises, you were watching for action. There is a difference, and now they can finally see it. Words could have brought temporary comfort, but only a genuine decision could have answered what your heart had been asking all along. They remembered how many times you made space for them, how often you understood what they couldn't explain, and how naturally you gave your presence without demanding anything extraordinary in return. Yet when the moment came for them to show what you truly meant, hesitation entered where certainty should have been. That is what your silence exposed. You weren't waiting to hear the perfect sentence. You were waiting to see whether they would willingly cross the distance themselves. And now they realize something shocking. Every moment they waited for you to reach out was another moment you were discovering that you didn't need to. What happens inside them after that is impossible to ignore. Suddenly, the memories they once controlled begin appearing differently. They remember your patience, but now they recognize the strength behind it. They remember your kindness, but now they understand it was never weakness. They remember how deeply you cared, and finally understand how rare it was to have someone willing to see the best in them even during uncertain moments. Don't skip, because something huge is waiting for you. They thought losing communication would eventually make the connection smaller, but instead the distance made certain memories louder. Now they are confronting the possibility that they misread you completely. They believed the person who cared the most would always be the person who returned first. But you showed them something they never expected. A person can care deeply and still refuse to chase what refuses to choose them. Stay till the end, because this is where their heart begins putting together the truth piece by piece. Your silence wasn't asking, "Do you miss me?" It was quietly asking something much bigger. When nobody is pulling you toward me, will you still choose to come? And now everything leads to the question they can no longer escape. What if the moment they finally became certain was the same moment you stopped needing their certainty? Don't skip. Something huge is waiting for you. That possibility changes everything because they finally understand that opportunities are not always announced before they disappear. Sometimes there is no dramatic final conversation. Sometimes someone simply becomes quieter, stronger, clearer, and eventually stops standing emotionally where they were left. They are realizing that your heart may have spent enough time waiting for an answer that never came, and somewhere along the way, you became your own answer. That is why they feel the weight of your absence now. They aren't only missing who you were with them, they are realizing who you may have become without them. Stay till the end, because the biggest twist is still unfolding. They thought this story was about whether you would ever ask them to return. But now they finally understand the truth. The real question was always whether they would recognize your worth before you discovered that you could walk forward without needing them to recognize it at all. But this is where everything suddenly becomes more intense. Don't skip. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you. They have finally stopped asking themselves when you will return, because another question has taken its place. What if they have already emotionally moved beyond the place where I left them? That thought changes everything. For the first time, they are seeing your silence not as a temporary distance, but as evidence of a transformation they never expected. You were once the person who kept trying, kept understanding, kept believing there was still something worth saving. Now they realize you may have reached a point where you no longer need answers from them to find peace within yourself. And that is the revelation breaking their old certainty apart. They assumed your heart would keep the door open simply because your feelings were real. What they failed to understand was that real feelings can exist beside self-respect. You could miss someone and still refuse to chase them. You could remember everything and still move forward. And suddenly, they understand why you never asked them to come back. You wanted to be chosen freely, not returned to because you begged someone to remember your value. Then one memory begins connecting to another, and the picture becomes impossible for them to deny. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you. They remember how you used to notice the smallest changes in them. They remember conversations where you listened beyond their words. They remember the emotional safety of knowing someone genuinely cared whether they were okay. Those things once felt normal because you gave them so naturally. Now they understand they were never ordinary. Don't skip. This realization goes deeper than simply missing you. They are recognizing that they may have mistaken something rare for something guaranteed. And once that truth settles in, their heart begins questioning every choice that created this distance. What if they had spoken sooner? What if they had shown certainty instead of expecting yours? What if they had understood that your patience was a gift, not an endless resource? Suddenly, your silence becomes a mirror, showing them everything they couldn't see while your presence was making life easier. And the most surprising part is this: they are beginning to realize that the person they thought would struggle most without the connection may actually be the person who learned the most from losing it. Now comes the truth that changes the entire emotional direction of this story. Don't skip. Something huge is waiting for you. They finally understand that you weren't waiting for them to become perfect. You were waiting for something much simpler and much more meaningful: clarity. You wanted to know that when the moment came, they could choose you without confusion, without endless hesitation, and without needing you to make the decision for them. But when that clarity never arrived, you gave yourself what they couldn't give you: an answer. Stay till the end, because what they realize next is enormous. Your silence did not erase your history together, it revealed which parts of that history mattered most. And now they are looking back at you differently. They no longer see someone who failed to ask them back. They see someone who finally understood that the right connection should never require one person to keep proving why it deserves another chance. Their heart is in pieces because the question has completely reversed. It is no longer, "Why didn't you ask me to come back?" Now it has become, "Why did I ever walk away expecting someone this rare to keep waiting for me?" And just when they believed the truth couldn't become any heavier, another realization changed everything. Don't skip. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you. They are finally understanding that your silence was never meant to punish them. It was the moment you stopped trying to control an outcome that required their choice too. You had already shown your heart through consistency, patience, and the way you kept showing up when things became uncertain. There was nothing left for you to prove. And now they can see it. They expected you to eventually send the message that would make everything easy again, but that message never came. Instead, time kept passing, and with every quiet day they were forced to face a truth they had avoided. If they truly wanted you back, why were they waiting for you to ask? Don't skip, because that question has completely changed the way they remember you. They no longer see your silence as absence. They see it as the moment you handed the decision back to them. And they waited so long that they began wondering whether the opportunity they assumed would always exist had quietly changed forever. Then comes the realization that makes every old memory feel completely different. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you. They remember the version of you who would have done almost anything to protect what mattered between you, and suddenly they understand why that version became quiet. It wasn't because you had become heartless. It was because you finally understood that one person cannot create mutual certainty alone. And now the smallest memories carry enormous weight. The way you listened. The way you remembered things nobody else noticed. The way you stayed when leaving would have required less effort. They once experienced those things without understanding how rare they were. Now distance has given them the perspective they should have had when you were still there. Don't skip. The shocking part isn't simply that they miss you. The shocking part is that they finally understand what they were receiving from you, and they cannot go backward and experience those moments with the awareness they have now. That is what keeps pulling their thoughts back to the same question: how did I have something this meaningful in front of me and still believe there would always be more time? And now the deepest truth begins to surface. Don't skip. Something huge is waiting for you, because this changes the meaning of everything that came before. They finally realize that you never asked them to come back because you needed to know whether they could recognize your worth without losing access to you first. You wanted a choice that came naturally, not one dragged out by endless explanations. And when they remained uncertain, something inside you changed. Stay till the end, because their biggest realization is no longer about your silence. It is about their own delay. They understand that while they were waiting to see how much you cared, they missed the fact that you had already shown them. While they were wondering whether you would return, they failed to ask themselves whether they had given you a reason to. And now their heart is in pieces because they finally see the reversal. You were never supposed to convince them to come back. They were supposed to realize why leaving someone like you could become the one decision they would someday wish they had understood differently. And now the truth they kept avoiding has finally become the one thought they cannot escape. Don't skip. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you. They are realizing that you never asked them to come back because somewhere along the way, you stopped believing that love should require an invitation to do what the heart already knows. They had every memory. They knew how you treated them. They knew how much patience you gave. They knew exactly where your heart had once stood. So why should you have needed to remind them? That question is shaking everything they once believed about your silence. They thought you were waiting for the perfect moment to reach out, but now they are wondering whether you were actually watching to see if they would finally take one step without being pulled. And when that step didn't come, you learned something powerful. Sometimes the absence of an answer becomes the answer itself. Don't skip, because this is where their heart begins to understand what their mind refused to see. You weren't trying to make them miss you. You were discovering whether they valued you enough to cross the distance on their own. Then something even more unexpected happens. They begin comparing who you were then with who you might be now. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you. They remember the version of you who kept hoping, kept giving another chance, and kept seeing possibilities even when things were unclear. But now they imagine you stronger, calmer, and no longer waiting beside the same unanswered questions. That image unsettles them because it destroys the assumption they once depended on, that whenever they became ready, you would automatically still be there. Don't skip. They finally understand that your life didn't freeze when they walked away. Your heart could heal. Your perspective could change. Your standards could become clearer. And the person who once wanted nothing more than to hear them say, "I'm coming back," may now need something far greater than words. They realize they cannot simply return to the old version of the connection and expect everything to continue where it stopped. If they ever stood before you again, they would have to meet the person your silence helped you become. And that realization is enormous, because now they aren't only afraid they lost your presence, they are wondering whether they lost the version of you who would have accepted less than certainty. But the biggest revelation is still waiting beneath all of this. Don't skip. Something huge is waiting for you. They are finally understanding that the most powerful thing you did was not leaving, speaking, or explaining, it was refusing to make their decision for them. You gave them space to reveal what they truly wanted, and now they have to live with what that space revealed. Stay till the end, because this is where the entire story turns around. They once believed you would eventually ask, "Will you come back?" But now the question haunting them is completely different. If I came back now, would they even see me the same way? And suddenly their heart feels the full weight of every delayed realization. Because they know there was once a time when your answer might have been immediate. There was once a time when one genuine step toward you could have changed everything. But time has passed, you have changed, and now they finally understand why you never called them back. You were waiting for a love strong enough to choose you without needing to be summoned, and they are only now realizing how rare it was to have someone like you waiting at all.